You are not the fixed person you think you are. Your capacity for kindness, focus, and courage can double in seconds, triggered by forces you never even notice. A stranger in a costume can rewire your moral compass without you knowing they were there. On a crowded Milan subway, morning commuters shuffle through their routines in perfect autopilot, eyes glazed, minds elsewhere, bodies moving through the mechanical dance of urban transit. A pregnant woman boards the train, visibly uncomfortable, searching for a seat. In this ordinary scene, only 37% of passengers offer their seat. The majority stay locked in their bubbles, scrolling phones, avoiding eye contact, continuing the silent agreement to remain uninvolved. This is normal. This is human nature at rest. But then something extraordinary happens. The same experiment repeats, but with one bizarre addition. As the pregnant woman enters from one door, a figure steps through another. A man dressed as Batman, full costume, cape, the whole theatrical display. He doesn't speak, he doesn't gesture, he simply stands there, an impossible disruption in the predictable flow of everyday life. And suddenly, the passengers transform. 67% now offer their seats, nearly double. The math is undeniable. The presence of something unexpected, something that breaks the pattern, shatters the autopilot state, and awakens something dormant inside ordinary people. This is not a story about costumes. This is a revelation about the architecture of your identity. The researchers at Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore in Milan conducted this field study across 138 subway rides, meticulously documenting human behavior in its natural habitat. What they discovered challenges everything you believe about who you are. The Batman effect, as they've named it, demonstrates that your personality, your values, your capacity for goodness, all the things you consider fixed and fundamental, are actually fluid, responsive, and alarmingly susceptible to invisible environmental triggers. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. When researchers interviewed the passengers who offered their seats in Batman's presence, 44% reported they never even saw him. They had no conscious awareness of the costumed figure standing just meters away. Their altruism emerged from a source they couldn't identify, couldn't explain, couldn't trace. Something in their environment shifted their behavior without ever touching their conscious mind. Think about that for a moment. Nearly half the people who became better versions of themselves had no idea why. No conscious decision, no moral deliberation, no internal dialogue about doing the right thing. They simply acted differently because the invisible structure of their attention had been disrupted. This raises a profound and uncomfortable question. How much of what you call your character is actually just the sum of environmental cues you're not even perceiving? The mechanism behind this phenomenon taps into something psychologists call involuntary mindfulness. Unlike traditional mindfulness practices that require deliberate effort, meditation, breathing exercises, conscious present moment awareness, involuntary mindfulness happens when something unexpected jolts your attention back to the present without any intention on your part. Batman on the subway doesn't ask you to be mindful. He simply is so unexpected, so incongruent with the script your brain has written for a Tuesday morning commute that your pattern recognition system short circuits. When your brain encounters something it cannot quickly categorize, it snaps out of default mode. Default mode is where you spend most of your life. That semi-conscious state where you're technically awake but operating on autopilot, following ingrained behavioral scripts, responding to stimuli without actually processing them. You walk the same route every day and don't remember the journey. You scroll your phone and can't recall what you saw 5 minutes ago. You sit in meetings and realize you haven't heard a word in the last 10 minutes. This is default mode. This is the zombie state that governs most of human existence. The Batman effect demonstrates that when something disrupts this default state, you suddenly become available to your environment in a completely different way. Your sensory awareness sharpens, your social antennae activate. You notice the pregnant woman, you register her discomfort, you feel the moral weight of the situation, not because you've become a better person in those seconds, but because you've simply become present to what was always there. This has staggering implications. It means that the difference between someone who helps and someone who doesn't might not be a difference in character at all. It might simply be a difference in attention. The cruel indifference you see in strangers on the street might not be cruelty or indifference. It might be absence, psychological absence. And if that's true, then most of human callousness isn't a moral failing, it's an attentional one. Previous research supports this strange reality. In a 2017 study with children, researchers found that kids persisted longer at difficult tasks when they referred to themselves in the third person using a superhero name. Instead of thinking, I can do this, they thought, Batman can do this, or Wonder Woman can do this. The simple linguistic shift, creating psychological distance from their immediate frustrated self, doubled their persistence. They became more resilient not through some deep personality change, but through a tiny cognitive trick that altered their relationship to the challenge. You are not a unified self. You are a collection of potential selves, and which one shows up depends on factors so subtle you'd laugh if someone listed them. The temperature of the room, the color of the walls, the angle of the light, the presence or absence of a stranger in a costume. These microscopic variables are constantly voting on which version of you gets to be in charge, and you're not even invited to the election. The implications spiral outward into every domain of human experience. How many marriages fail not because of incompatibility, but because couples spend their entire relationship in default mode, never truly present to each other? How many careers stagnate because people sleepwalk through their work, never disrupted enough to see new possibilities? How many friendships dissolve because both parties are so locked into their routine patterns of interaction that they can't perceive the other person changing, growing, needing something different? The Batman effect suggests that transformation doesn't require years of therapy or spiritual awakening. It requires disruption, strategic, intentional disruption of the automated patterns that keep you locked in the same behavioral loops. This is why travel changes people, why crisis can catalyze growth, why falling in love or experiencing grief can fundamentally alter your personality. These experiences are Batman on the subway, massive pattern interruptions that force you out of default mode and into actual presence. But you don't need to wait for crisis or costume. You can architect your own disruptions. Researchers speculate that the Batman effect might be socially contagious. Even if only a few people consciously notice the disruption, their changed behavior, the sudden alertness, the shift in posture, the act of standing to offer a seat, creates a ripple effect through the group. Attention becomes infectious. Presence spreads. One person waking up can wake up others, even if those others never identify what woke them. This means you have more power than you think. Not the power to force others to change, but the power to be the disruption in their environment that makes change possible. You can be someone's Batman, not through grand gestures or performative heroism, but simply by being present enough, unexpected enough, authentic enough that your existence interrupts the default scripts running in the people around you. Consider what this means for urban design, for public spaces, for the architecture of everyday life. If unexpected, non-threatening events can double pro-social behavior, then cities could be designed with intentional disruptions, public art that defies expectation, performances that break the fourth wall of urban anonymity, installations that demand attention and presence. Every subway platform could become a laboratory for awakening humanity from its trance. But let's go deeper. Let's examine the philosophical vertigo at the heart of this research. If your behavior can change so dramatically based on stimuli you don't even consciously perceive, then what does that say about free will, about moral responsibility, about the coherence of identity itself? The uncomfortable truth is that you are more like a radio than a fixed entity. You're a receiver, constantly tuned to environmental frequencies, and what you call your choices are often just the translation of signals you never knew you were receiving. This doesn't diminish you. It reveals your potential. Because if you're that changeable, that responsive, that fluid, then you're not trapped. The personality you hate, the habits you can't break, the limitations you accept as permanent, they're not welded to your identity. They're just the current configuration, maintained by the current environment. Change the environment, change the signals, and you change the self. The Batman study showed that even people who didn't see Batman were affected. That suggests the mechanism is even subtler than visual recognition. Maybe it's the collective shift in attention that Batman triggered in those who did see him. Maybe it's the micro changes in body language, the slight increase in alertness that spread through the train car like an invisible wave. Humans are exquisitely sensitive to social cues we can't consciously identify. We pick up on tension, safety, alertness, and threat through channels that bypass our awareness entirely. We are social animals networked at a level far beneath language or conscious thought. So when you walk into a room, you're not just an individual. You're a walking environmental variable for everyone else present. Your energy, your presence, your level of consciousness. These are atmospheric conditions that alter everyone's internal weather. This is not mysticism. This is just the acknowledgement that human beings are permeable, that we interpenetrate each other's psychology constantly, and that the boundaries we imagine between self and other are far more porous than we pretend. The really radical move is to start treating yourself as your own environment. You are both the person and the context. You can be your own Batman. Researchers from the earlier study with children found that self-talk matters enormously. When kids talk to themselves in the third person, can Sarah do this? Yes, Sarah can. They accessed a different relationship to themselves. They became both the actor and the observer, the self and the environmental cue. This dual position gave them leverage they didn't have when fully identified with their immediate frustration or fatigue. You can do this right now. Instead of, I'm overwhelmed, try thinking, she's feeling overwhelmed right now. Or, he's noticing resistance. The simple grammatical shift creates psychological space. It's a disruption in the default narrative. And in that disruption, possibility appears. Not the possibility of becoming someone different, but the possibility of remembering you were never as fixed as you thought. Your brain is a prediction machine, constantly generating expectations about what will happen next based on past patterns. This is efficient, but limiting. When Batman shows up, the prediction fails, the pattern doesn't complete, and in that gap, your brain has to actually look at reality instead of overlaying its template. This is why novelty is so powerful. Not novelty for its own sake, but novelty as a tool for breaking prediction loops that have calcified into prison walls. So what's your Batman? What environmental cue could you introduce into your daily routine that would disrupt your autopilot enough to make you present? It could be as simple as taking a different route to work, wearing something completely unlike your usual style, starting a conversation with a stranger, saying yes when you usually say no, or no when you usually say yes. The content matters less than the disruption itself. You're not trying to become someone else. You're trying to become available to the person you already are beneath the automated responses. The subway experiment also reveals something about moral philosophy. We tend to judge people's character based on their actions, but this research suggests that context might be a more powerful determinant than character. The person who walked past the pregnant woman without offering a seat isn't necessarily less compassionate than the person who offered. They might just be more locked in default mode. This should make us both more humble about our own goodness and more generous in our judgment of others. Most human failure isn't malice, it's absence. But it also means that creating good humans might be less about teaching morality and more about designing environments that keep people awake. Schools that break routine constantly, workplaces that build in pattern disruption, relationships that prioritize presence over predictability. What if the goal isn't to make people better through argument or shame, but to design contexts that make goodness easier, more accessible, more automatic? There's a beautiful paradox here. To escape autopilot, you need disruption. But you can't be disrupted all the time. That would be chaos. You need routines, patterns, scripts. They conserve energy and allow you to function. The skill is knowing when you're in default mode and when you need to wake up. The skill is being able to notice when your routines have hardened from useful tools into invisible prisons. The skill is maintaining enough meta-awareness to catch yourself sleepwalking through your own life. And maybe that's the deepest lesson of the Batman effect. You are not your habits. You are not your history. You are not even your conscious self-concept. You are the capacity to respond to the present moment in ways you cannot predict. You are potential held in tension by environmental forces you rarely perceive. And in that tension lives all your possibility for change, for growth, for becoming someone you can't yet imagine. The researchers concluded that unexpected events can promote prosociality even in the absence of awareness, with implications for encouraging kindness in public settings. But the implications run deeper than public policy. They touch the nature of consciousness itself. If you can be changed without knowing what changed you, then what you call consciousness is just the tip of a massive unconscious iceberg. You are being shaped constantly by forces beneath your awareness. The question is whether you're going to be a passive recipient of those forces or an active architect of them. Start small. Notice where you're on autopilot. That's already a disruption. The moment you realize you've been sleepwalking, you're partially awake. Then introduce tiny, strategic disruptions. Change one small thing about your routine. Speak to yourself differently. Put yourself in contexts that demand presence. Seek out the unexpected. Create little moments of Batman for yourself and watch what becomes possible. You are far more changeable than you think, which means you're far less trapped than you feel. The bars of your cage are made of pattern, and pattern can be broken. The self you think is solid is actually fluid, waiting for the right disruption to reveal what you've always been capable of. So, be your own Batman. Step into your own scene as the unexpected element, and watch how quickly the person you've been gives way to the person you could become. If this perspective shifted something in you, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and comment with your city. I want to know where in the world people are waking up to this.